Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. As promised, we're picking up the most enigmatic and unsettling story I've told you so far, that of the security guard Pier Fortunato Zanfretta. Let's recap. This man has already been abducted twice by a kind of aliens aboard a strange triangular-shaped flying vessel in just over 20 days. The events took place in a rugged area near Genoa, and both times the man underwent regressive hypnosis, during which he confirmed his story. Moreover, the command of the local Carabinieri station collected testimonies and evidence of something that had never been seen before. If you haven't seen the first video, I suggest you watch it before this one, because that way this strange story will gain more depth. You'll find the link above. But let's proceed without delay. We left a rather shaken Zanfretta after the second abduction as he tries to get his life back on track. He went back to work, he returned to his family, but as we know, misfortunes are like cherries, one leads to another. And once again, the old saying turned into a sad truth because not much time passed after his second abduction, when once again, Zanfretta is invited to attend a meeting with the green lizard-like beings. This time, however, it doesn't happen during the very bleak Genoese winter. It's the height of summer, July 30th, 1979, and Zanfretta, given his past experiences, has been reassigned by his security company to a somewhat less complicated job. In fact, he no longer patrols semi-isolated areas alone, nor does he drive a car anymore because his work now takes place in Genoa, in the city and its immediate surroundings. For this reason, instead of the 127, he has now been assigned a scooter, which is more suitable for short trips in city traffic. Quite suddenly, Zanfretta, who was patrolling the city of Genoa, albeit in a suburban area, reports to headquarters that he is not feeling well, that he has a severe migraine. Then communications drop and it is no longer possible to reach him. The rescue operation is immediately set in motion and his colleagues rush to Zanfretta's last known location, but there is no trace of the man. The search area is expanded more and more, and after about 2 hours the night watchman is found, while in a state of panic, moving on foot through the woods of Montefash, another rugged area behind Genoa, quite far, over 10 kilometers from his patrol zone. How he ended up there is explained by Zanfretta himself, who claims that he was lifted up together with his Vespa by the usual white light and dropped off, scooter and all, right at the spot where his colleagues found him. The story already sounds strange on its own, but it becomes even more baffling when his colleagues question the guard at the only road leading up the mountain. In fact, access to the mountain is only possible via a narrow, winding road that is guarded 24 hours a day by a watchman in a booth. When questioned, the guard is adamant in stating that absolutely no one, least of all a man on a Vespa, passed by his post in the past few hours. This latest return to the spotlight brings consequences that are easily predictable for Zanfretta, who at the time is labeled by the media as a serial liar, a fantasist, or at best, a man of rather unstable mental health. Zanfretta, now tired of being considered crazy, decides to take an extreme and rather dangerous measure. This time, he won't just undergo a session of hypnotic regression, but to prove to even the most skeptical that he is telling the absolute truth, he will have pentothal injected into him. Now, pentothal, which is the commercial name for thiopentyl sodium, is an extremely powerful barbiturate that, if administered in subanesthetic doses, causes the patient to experience a total collapse of inhibitions and an uncontrollable urge to answer questions posed to them in an extensive and coherent manner. For this reason, it has commonly been associated with the popular name truth serum. The examination takes place at the International Center for Medical and Psychological Hypnosis in Milan and is conducted by Professor Marco Marchesan. Zanfretta, under the effect of the serum and in a deep trance state, not only confirmed what he had stated while awake, but also recalled being lifted by a green light that transported him onto the alien spacecraft. These are Zanfretta's exact words. After this episode, for a few months, his life returned to the tracks of normality. But the peace really doesn't last long. It's December 2nd, 1979, almost exactly a year after the first disappearance, and once again, Zanfretta vanishes. Once again, he went out on patrol in his trusty 127, when, as usual, he radioed the station to say he was experiencing a severe headache, and then vanished into thin air. But that night would not be like all the others because the head of the Security Institute, Giovanni Casiba, had instructed all patrols around the city and nearby areas to report anything out of the ordinary to headquarters. Even Casiba has left his office and is out patrolling in his car, scanning the night sky. And just as Zanfretta reports his discomfort to headquarters, Casiba is driving in the Torriglia area, right where the first abduction took place. Suddenly, both Casiba's car and those of some colleagues following him shut off and come to an abrupt stop. Casiba instinctively gets out of the car and looks up at the sky, but what he sees takes his breath away. A strange object is hovering above them, partially concealed by a cloud, and that odd thing is shining two extremely bright beams of light directly onto their cars. Capybara acts on instinct and empties the entire magazine of his pistol at the cloud, then takes a colleague's weapon and empties that magazine as well, always aiming at the object suspended in the air. Suddenly, the lights go out all at once and the object shoots off into the night sky at an incredible speed. At that point, the cars suddenly start working normally again, but Zanfretta is nowhere to be found. And he can't be found despite the many men searching for him. Finally, the car is located, stopped, with one door wide open. At that moment, the search also involves the carabinieri, who had been alerted in the meantime, and they finally find him. Half a kilometer from his car, deep in the woods, Zanfretta is unharmed, but he is in a state of deep shock and is immediately taken to safety. Unfortunately, the investigations are not able to prove much, despite the testimony of Casiba and his colleagues who fired at something in the sky. One of the patrolmen present will be so shocked that he will quit his patrol job after just a few weeks. Once again, Zanfretta undergoes a regressive diagnosis and once again confirms that he was kidnapped, but this time he adds an important detail. The aliens would have given him an object, a tetrahedron contained inside a sphere, ordering him to deliver it to a professor, a certain J. Allen Hynek. At this point, a couple of clarifications are needed, one regarding the subject and the other regarding the professor. The object, the tetrahedron contained within a translucent sphere, is not entirely unknown in the ufology community. In fact, several decades later, a larger version of that same object would become the protagonist of a harrowing aerial encounter between itself and a fighter jet from a U.S. aircraft carrier. The other concerns the famous professor to whom Zanfretta was supposed to deliver the artifact, J. Allen Hynek. Although Zanfretta swears he did not know who he was, and there is no reason to doubt his word, Hynek was a very famous American astronomer, particularly known for his participation in American research programs. The most famous one catalogued as Project Blue Book. These programs were aimed at analyzing sightings of unidentified flying objects to determine whether they were hoaxes or truly unknown technologies potentially of non-terrestrial origin. In short, these beings of light asked Zanfretta to deliver an artifact incomprehensible to our science to a well-known American professor involved in ultra-secret government projects. An interesting fact, to say the least, is that Zanfretta never delivered the artifact to Hynek. First, because he had no idea who he was and, in any case, had no way of getting in touch with him, and second, because the object emitted such a powerful electric field that it would electrocute anyone who handled it, except for Hynek and Zanfretta himself. The metronaut actually buried it in a forest, a place known only to him, after witnessing the cruel death of a hare that had gotten too close to the object. Moreover, during the session, Zanfretta recounts another detail that seems irrelevant, but is actually of great importance. The man claims that the aliens told him that the following day they would leave the area where he had encountered them to head to Spain. Is that all, you might ask? No, because if you look through the chronicles of the time, you'll discover that on the very next day, after Zanfretta's fourth encounter on December 4, 1979, a surprising piece of news broke. In the towns of Guadalajara, a Spanish veterinarian ran off the road with his car while trying to escape from a UFO that was chasing him. Coincidence? It's possible, but in any case, it's an absolutely unsettling coincidence. Now let's take a little step aside to highlight a fact that will leave you completely amazed. Zanfretta's superiors, now completely baffled by the ongoing events involving their employee, decide to find out once and for all whether what the night watchman is saying is true, or if it's a case of delusions of grandeur or perhaps just a grotesque joke on Zanfretta's part. Without telling anyone, they send the 127 assigned to Zanfretta to a workshop and have some interesting devices installed. First of all, a position tracker. Let's remember that GPS did exist at the time, but it was an American military secret and obviously not available to the public. However, there were other ways to locate a vehicle, so a powerful traditional radio transmitter is installed in the car, well hidden, which, thanks to a technique known as triangulation, could be located with surprising accuracy. Then, recalling Zanfretta's account of the terrible temperature he was exposed to, they also install a sophisticated thermometer and, finally, even a magnetic field detector. To leave nothing to chance, remembering how Zanfretta claimed that the car had been lifted by some kind of beam of light, they mounted extremely delicate steel rods on the suspension arms, which would break if the car were lifted off the ground. It was a foolproof way to determine how much truth there was in the man's stories. On the night between February 14th and 15th, 1980, once again Zanfretta contacts the control center saying he has a severe headache. At that point, his colleagues, knowing the location of the car, rush to the scene and arrive within minutes, but they find only the abandoned car with the door left open. Once again, Zanfretta seems to have disappeared until they hear him moaning and discover that he is inside a steep ravine, clinging to a tree as if his life depended on it. They rescue him, bring him to safety, and examine the car's instruments. And this is where the shock comes in. The magnetic field detector didn't record anything, but the thermometer did, and the temperature inside the vehicle reached over 43 degrees in February. But wait, do you remember the small steel rods installed in the suspension? Well, all 4 cables are broken, just as if the car had really been lifted into the air. I'll let you imagine the look on the supervisor's face. Once again, Zanfretta undergoes hypnosis, but this time something strange happens. Instead of answering like a good boy, Zanfretta absolutely refuses to provide even the slightest explanation. His only phrase, repeated obsessively, was a question with a negative answer: Tixel. No one knows what that phrase was supposed to mean, and Zanfretta himself has no idea why his subconscious uttered it. At that point, it was inevitable that Zanfretta would be considered no longer fit to carry a weapon, and so the chief of police in Genoa revoked his gun license, an act that led to a long legal battle between the night watchman and the authorities, which eventually resulted in his pistol being returned to him. Fortunately, the misadventures of Pier Fortunato Zanfretta came to an end in that turbulent year of 1980, and the man no longer wishes to talk about it. The story of this man is, although bizarre in some respects, certainly fascinating. Even though there is a possibility that the descriptions of the beings who allegedly abducted him are false memories induced by the shock he experienced, Zanfretta was almost certainly witness to something incredible and probably devastating for his psyche. Numerous and incontrovertible testimonies remain of the appearance of unidentified flying objects precisely coinciding with the disappearances. It is precisely these peculiarities that make the Zanfretta case, although much debated, one of the clearest examples of close encounters of the third kind. But wait, we're not done yet. Do you remember the first encounters in the area of Torriglia and Marzano? Well, it seems that this pleasant mountain area became irresistible to our lizard-like friends because on February 24, 2016, and very little is known about this in the news, 2 girls who live right there, whom we'll call Paula and Marta, heard their dog start barking like crazy, which is unusual because he's usually very well behaved. Then they hear a very loud noise like that of a low-flying jet. They go out onto the balcony and see in the sky an aircraft shaped like a boomerang. They describe it as a very large object with multiple levels, a transparent dome on the top, and what they call a structure on the bottom part. The object slowly circles the set station counterclockwise and has multicolored lights along the fuselage. Fortunately, nothing irreparable happens to them, and the disc moves toward a nearby mountain. The strange thing is that the very loud noise reported by the 2 girls suddenly stops when the object starts to move. The flying saucer became incredibly, absolutely silent in just a few moments. It is worth noting that the home of the 2 girls is just a few hundred meters from both the Casa Nostra Villa and the Passo della Colla, places that have seen numerous Zanfretta encounters and where, according to him, he buried the sphere given to him by the aliens. What can I tell you? Illusions? Jokes? Or is there a lot of truth in Zanfretta's account of the 2 girls? Please make sure to write it in the comments and let me know what you think. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell, choosing the All Notifications option. Otherwise, you risk missing all the upcoming videos. Thank you for staying with me, and see you in the next video.